This talk right here is a new one. It's one that's important to me, and it's one that when I look at consistent themes across the industry, what I hate doing is getting up on the stage and talking about the same things that have happened all over time. But we're going to do that a little bit with some new nuances here. The biggest challenge that I see in most organizations is that they're not securing their organizations. They're focusing on long-term 3-year strategies, which are things you got to do. But the focus has to be in shorter term gains and how do we go through little periods of pain, but fixing things along the road to get better at what we do to protect our organizations, the company. So I'll talk a little bit about that. But I'm Dave. I started TrustedSec and Binary Defense a number of years ago. My life mission's always been to help others and make the world a safer place. I wrote the Social-Engineer Toolkit, Magic Unicorn, co-authored the book Metasploit, the Penetration Tester's Guide. I'm on the news quite frequently. I'm now good friends with Diamond Dallas Page, which is really weird. By the way, I just slept over his house last week. So that was it's a long story. But he's a good dude, and he did not show me the diamond cutter, unfortunately. He's like 67 years old, but the dude is actually really strong. He beat me in lifting, which is really weird. But my whole career has been, trying to help others out. I helped out the TV show Mr. Robot. I've testified in front of Congress. I was in a Chris Brown rap video. That was really weird. I don't recommend that. I'm not, my wife actually just taught me how to bob my hips to the beat. I didn't realize that you could do drums too as part of it. I thought it was just anyways, it's a long story, but I can actually move my hips now. We sponsor the Cavs and the Browns. Talk about building a company from the basement of your house and writing, the concept on a napkin in a bar, and then seeing, your logos on a major sports organization, and still, TrustedSec's 100% owned by me, Binary Defense. I'm a majority owner of the company, and being able to stay true to doing things the right way and moving forward is a really cool thing. One thing I'll advise everybody here is that any of you can do the exact same damn thing if you believe in yourself and you just go and do it. I was the chief security officer over at Diebold and had a great job. I was one of the youngest VPs in Diebold history. Everything was great. I had a global cybersecurity program. Life was perfect. And I was able to really build their cybersecurity program in a way that hadn't been done before because I focused on the people. And that's one thing I think we forget a lot about when we look at building cybersecurity programs. The first thing that I did when I got in was, I ran a pen test, of course. I wanted to see how bad we were, and it was pretty freaking bad. And so I was like, well, hey, how am I going to fix all this stuff when I have to rely on a lot of other people? And so the first thing I did was forge relationships with IT. I bought them beer and pizza, and I was their best friend. Anybody familiar with ITIL and change control, right? Yep. The bane of our existence in many cases, but a good way of getting a good hold on what's happening. It's actually a positive. But you all know it can be a very cumbersome process, right? So there was, this is in 2009. This is one of my favorite stories at Diebold. As everybody remember Cisco ScanSafe? So before they integrated with ScanSafe, ScanSafe was his own company, and you'd have these proxy chains that you can tunnel out 18.443 out of. So you could do 8080, and then, all egress-wise, 18.443 would be essentially blocked, and it would do SSL termination, and you can inspect all traffic, and it was great. And we're a global company, over 40,000 employees in 55 countries. And I'm like, well, listen, I wonder if I could shut down all ports and protocols, including all ports other than 18.443 in our user population and server environments, baseline some of it first, but then block all egress ports and then route everybody through, Cisco ScanSafe with all of the different towers. But doing something like that in a global company takes a long time, right? It takes a long time. It's like application control or allow listing. It takes a long time to do that type of stuff. Well, I didn't want to wait. So I was like, hey, there's this RFC over here that kind of looks like this. It has nothing to do with this whatsoever. But I went to my networking buddies and I'm like, hey, can you just do this and make it sound like it's this over here? And my one network buddy's like, nah, dude, I'm not gonna do that. I'm like, come on, I'll buy you some more beer and pizza. He's like, that's not gonna cover it. So I went to my second buddy, and he was the newer guy and everything. He's like, yeah, I'll do it. I'm like, okay, cool. But I had their backs, and we completely blocked all ports and protocols across the entire enterprise worldwide in one day, including 18.443, which shut down any ability to get any type of C2 in our environment. SSL termination broke, shells over 443 and 80, and it was amazing because we were able to do it. And I also broke our entire manufacturing process for our ability to actually build ATMs for a day. It was so close. It was so good except for that one manufacturing plant. But I had enough relationships out there to be able to go and fix it, and it was actually a good thing from an awareness perspective what we were able to do. And that's the thing. When we look at cybersecurity programs, we're not fast enough to move things. We don't move things fast enough because the business itself is always moving fast, right? So how do we move faster and fix things faster in a way that we're allowed to do without breaking the entire organization? Or if you break it, maybe not as bad, but like every so often so you don't get as much trouble. So we'll talk about that. That's Diamond Dallas Page. That was cool. That was a good time. Okay, so the problem we face in security in general is, again, the timing perspective. Now, I've been giving talks for over 20 years in this industry, and I feel like all the talks that I hear are the same types of talks. Hey, we got to do the basics. We got to do vulnerability management. We got to have a governance program. We have to do strategy. We have to have a monitoring detection program. We need to have incident response. We need to have a good endpoint protection product. We have to have EDRs. We have to go to next-gen firewalls. It's the same stuff, right? And now it's all, we got to do AI. We got to do AI. We don't even know what it does yet in the applied principles of cybersecurity, but yet we got to be doing. And if we're a company that's a VAR, oh my God, if you're not doing AI, you're way behind the times, right? Man, it's all of these words. DLP was my favorite. Has anybody ever implemented a DLP program that's actually worked other than like regexes of social security numbers and PCI? Like, they wanted us to go into the business and like map out all the different, high priority confidential information with tagging, and you had to go to each business, and there was like 2 security people doing it. That would have taken 700 years, and none of the business people want to do it anyway, because it's like new technology. Like, what the hell is this? I back up everything on my USB drive anyway, so why does this matter? And so, DLP never took off because it wasn't realistic. And most security programs aren't realistic either. I'm not sure why it's doing that, but it's fine. It's probably my computer. Most security programs aren't realistic either. Does everybody here feel like they have enough people to run their program, their cybersecurity program? No. Why is that? Why do we have not enough people? Is there too many threats? Well, I mean, you have unlimited resources with nation states. You have ransomware groups making, billions of dollars. Why would we not have enough people? Organization? Prioritization. I actually like that. That's pretty close to it. You want to try different executive bonuses may be a problem, yeah? Well, I would say, this is one of the jokes I commonly use, but I can solve cybersecurity today if every time HR hired one employee for that position, you hired one security person. Because then you could just sit over the shoulder and be like, dude, like, don't click. Okay, he clicked it. Okay, grab his computer, pass it over to Bob. Bob passes it to Mary. Mary passes it to James. And then all of a sudden, now you're all set. But we don't have that luxury, right? And so when you look at the prioritization, everybody in every large organization, enterprise, high and small, and if you're in the medium-sized businesses, small to medium-sized businesses, good luck. You're lucky to have one person dedicated to security, let alone half an IT person. And so really, cybersecurity is still afforded to the larger companies that can actually do it. And by the way, we do work with pretty much every large organization out there, and we're not doing it really well. We're still not doing it really well. And that's because, again, businesses move really fast. Technology moves really fast. Now we got to do the cloud. Now we got to do AI. Now we got to go to third-party, companies for our problems and products. And all of these things continuously change, and we're left in the wayside behind it. So again, what is our prioritization then? How do we focus on moving quick in a company that literally is moving too slow for us to be able to address? And one thing I can say is that it's something that we talk about a lot, but we typically don't have a focus on it because we have so many fires that we're dealing with on a regular basis. IR. Does anybody here not have enough meetings? Joff, you don't have enough meetings?
Programs are slow. Yes, this is a true statement.
Thank you for confirming that. But we have so many different distractions hitting us in a day that even for me, it's tough to do. And then we look at adversary capabilities, and it's interesting. I made a statement that 100% came true, right? I was 100% right on this, as I am with everything in life. I said ransomware is going to be a fad. Definitely right. Nailed it. That was such a great statement for me to make like 8 years ago. There's actually a video of it. I'm not going to tell you which one it is. If you ever find it, I'm just not going to deny it. It's going to be AI generated. I never said that. But I said ransomware is going to be a fad because I didn't think ransomware groups were going to have the level of organization and investment and return on investment that they were going to do. They were these fraction groups that were using off-the-shelf commodity stuff, hitting really small organizations or mom and pop and grandpa that didn't know technology. And so now you start to see the investment in getting better with R&D and tooling, the sanctuary type, the countries that will allow them to do without having to worry about extradition. You have all of these different areas now that are starting to coming through, and now you have a lot of money being invested in this, right? So now you have adversaries that are purely driven by monetary value, as well as geopolitical too, depending on where they're at from a location perspective. And now they have a ton of money. I'm not going to bring up MGM and Caesars, but Caesars 17 million. MGM didn't pay, which is great, but I mean they're down for like forever. I mean, did you see how much that was estimated they lost? It was like $117 million or whatever, and they're still recovering from that. So you look at the total effect of that, it's probably going to be 200 or plus. It's crazy the amount of damage that you can inflict, based off of these types of attacks, and it continuously progresses. Now, what I love that's interesting is that everybody now is like, well, we have an EDR. All right, like EDRs were supposed to be the fix for cybersecurity. Now, my favorite part about EDRs is that if you are going to target an organization, anybody here on the red side? Got a lot of folks on the red. It's not a lot of extra people on the red. I'm surprised. When you're going after a company, do you just generate a payload and then hopefully run it to make sure it works, in the environment? Do you just like test and prod, or do you actually do some reconnaissance, look at the organization you're targeting? And I'm sure from an open source intelligence gathering perspective, people in LinkedIn don't say, hey, I have experience in CrowdStrike, or I have experience in SentinelOne, or this in that company that you're targeting. So I'm sure we don't know what products they're using in that company before we actually go and target it. And so the thought today, when you look at most organizations, is that they literally have a baseline of their organization that is commodity, an EDR that is out of the box. They don't tweak it to their environment. These products are great, but they don't morph and change to the organization itself and how they're unique. Now, this is just a small example, and this is obviously nothing crazy, but I'm running my tool here called Trevor C2 that I released at DerbyCon a couple of years ago. And Trevor C2 is a command and control infrastructure that uses a really cool technique for, I'll explain this in a second, but let me pause this for a second because it's cool. It's a cool story. So with Trevor C2, it embeds, it takes AES 256 and it embeds it inside of a web page, and it uses get and post requests that emulate a normal user browsing the website. And you can clone any website you want to or build your own, but if you don't have the session cookie or session ID built into the C2, it'll actually redirect you to a different site if you want to, or show you a different site. So you never actually get to see the command and control. So it tucks everything away via AES, and it hides everything and then uses the command and control there. Now, what I wanted to do with this as an example is if you look at the source code for Trevor C2, which is on GitHub, it looks like a normal application. Doesn't have a lot of heavy obfuscation, doesn't do a bunch of weird things like it's loading into memory. And for about 2.5 years, it never got picked up by any antivirus or EDR product there because it looked like a legitimate one, even though it was public. Now, most recently, most of the EDR products and antivirus products will flag this. However, there's a section in there that has a bunch of comment code that says, hey, make sure you change these default configurations before you run it. And by the way, if you change those default configurations, guess what happens? It gets picked up by nothing. Nothing. So you can go and run this whenever you want to. Now, this is Windows 11 running Windows Defender. It got picked up. I changed the variable name stream to streams, plural, and we're good to go. So we get our shell here. And what I did is I used an ISO to open up a bash script that kicked off regsvr32, which, by the way, regsvr32 gets picked up by Windows Defender, right? But there's like 300 different ways to use regsvr32 that it doesn't get picked up. So if you use like regsvr32 and you copy scriptlet object.dll to a different location, or if you chunk it up and use like Excel to download the file and then use regsvr32 locally without having it to specify a HTTP parameter, it'll also run. So there's like a million different ways to still get code execution on that with those specific SIGs. But in any case, we know that an attacker is going to try to build some sort of evasion techniques. Now, when I go into a company, the biggest thing that I get concerned with is not an organization that is running a security product. I don't care if it's Splunk or QRadar or you have an MSSP or you're running CrowdStrike, whatever. Again, those products can be absolutely amazing if you make it your own. But when I start to run into an issue is when the organization understands their behavior of their environment, and then they look for deviations of that behavior. Hey, why are we seeing a normal, user LAN type of endpoints now communicating to server infrastructure over, RPC? That's not normal. When we start looking at the behavior of things, that's when we start to run into issues. And I'll talk about why that's important. But the big thing here is that our strategies today, they move slow. If we're trying to build processes around cloud infrastructure, is that going to be easy to do? No. If we're going and implementing application control or allow listing, or moving to a zero trust model, if we're moving to a zero trust model, can you do that overnight? No one even knows what that means still, right? It's like, well, we do like a lot of weird things, and there's like, is it a product? Is it like network segmentation? Is it this, or is it a philosophy? Yes, it takes a long time to do these types of things. So what are the 6 things to do to defend right now that can literally make your program move much faster? And it does come to prioritization. So the objective, if you think about this conceptually, my entire career has been red teaming. It has been going after organizations and breaking into them, right? And when I look at how would you stop me or other attackers that are way better than me, you have to think of this in the sense that we're never going to be 100% secure with one employee dedicated to one security person. It's just not going to happen. However, if we create enough coverage, now I use that word loosely because it's been cannibalized by the MITRE ATT&CK framework. The MITRE ATT&CK framework is good, but it's been since kind of morphed into something different. But we need enough coverage in our environment to make it very difficult for an attacker to go undetected, okay? Now, James Lee or Egypt said a number of years ago, there was an argument going on Twitter, which I know it's really weird that there was an argument on Twitter. But there was an argument on Twitter, and somebody made the comment of, well, a red team only has to find a system that the organization didn't know about once, and now they have access to everything, and it's, blue team's jobs are so hard. And Egypt said, well, I'll reverse that. It only takes the blue teamer to have the right one solid detection that the red teamer didn't know about to discover that attack actually occurred. So how do we build landmines in our environment across all of the different phases of an attack that are unique to ourselves? If I don't know your detections, I am screwed. Because I don't know what's real, I don't know what's not, I don't know what's going to trigger an alarm, I don't know what's not. And I gave a talk a couple of years ago here at Wild West, and it was one of my favorite talks because once you get to that level of sophistication in an organization that actually has a good monitor detection program, then it gets really fun because now you have to assume they're going to see you and you have to plan your attack accordingly. One of my favorite ones that I do is I do research in LinkedIn and I find who the main IT admin is or PowerShell admin or developer. And I build this I'll grab a script from like Microsoft that's like 3,000 lines of code. And I'll tuck my malicious code like 3/4 way in the code. And I'll put in the comment code, hey, this is by so-and-so. It's for Exchange reporting metrics or Office 365 reporting metrics. Give me, here's my email address if you run into any issues. So when the SOC analyst actually looks at it, he's like, oh, this is from, Bob. I know him. He's good to go. He's an employee. I don't need to worry about this, even though it's doing process injection, has a ton of coding in it. It's going to be fine. Now, when you look at landmines in an organization, though, when I go into companies, there's 2 concepts here that are really important that we really fail on, and it comes down to these 6. 1, we have to have visibility. Now, visibility is the longest stretch of all of this, right? And we're always going to get better at visibility, but we have to have visibility in the organization, telemetry data, all right? And now, I don't care if it's just basic, just getting some endpoint logs, or you have an EDR, fantastic. Sysmon is one of my favorites from an ETW perspective. Looking at cloud infrastructure, getting logs from that, anything you can get your hands on from a log standpoint is going to be important. But once we have that, we should be spending most of our resources not on this 3-year strategy. And don't get me wrong, we still need to do that. We still got to have a governance structure. We still got to improve. We still got to work with the business, all this other stuff. But our focus has to be on creating landmines in our organization that it's going to figure out what an attacker's doing. Good example. I'm sure you have a handful of IT admins, okay? Maybe you have depending on your size of the organization, you have 1,000 admins. Why not map all those 1,000 admins, all of their workstations, the tools that they use, and look for deviations of those tools that they're not being used from other locations. Like PSExec, for example, is often used by adversaries. Do you use that in your environment? Well, no. If you see it ever being run from admin accounts or jump boxes that you use for administration, that's a red flag. Or carve them out in your own network segment. One of my favorite ones that snagged our red team one time still hurts me. I still cry inside sometimes at night. We got remote code execution onto a customer, and it was what we call a no notice. It's like a 6-month engagement. 0 days, weaponization of tooling, command and control that was getting undetected by everything out there. It was amazing. It was like all this super secret stuff all coming together for one specific attack. And we got access to this box. We're high-fiving. We're jamming to techno music and Infected Mushroom. We're all like having a great time. It's time to break out the whiskey. I got a good bottle of whiskey. We all start drinking. Everything's great. And then all of a sudden our connection drops. Like, oh, must have had a coding error or something. Like something dropped. Let's figure it out. They call us like 10 minutes later, like, hey, we got you guys. Like, what? 6 months of research and you got us in like 15 minutes? Yeah. I'm like, how did you do it? Well, they had mapped their users, so they had two separate types of groups in their AD environment. One, technical users, just based on role and title. So hey, I'm a sysadmin, I'm a PowerShell user, I'm a developer, technical. Then they said, well, if you're sales, marketing, whatever, non-technical. If they ever see applications, tools, command line, anything that is considered technical being run in their environment, they built this whole profile around what a technical user is. It triggers an alarm saying, hey, there's technical commands being used on here. We need to take a look. Creating landmines. Would I ever have thought of that? Now, granted, dropping into, a command shell, red flag, obviously, right? But when you're just executing certain things like, understanding where you're at, your infrastructure, the subnet, those are going to be things that I'm not going to expect alarms on. But if you understand your environment, again, that's one landmine of many. It starts to get really challenging for me as an adversary. It's not going to be perfect, but if you have so many of these across your infrastructure, you're going to see it. And I'll tell you one thing that we suck at that should have so much research and focus in this industry that will really make a big difference. But there's a talk that I gave with one of my friends that works at the FBI. His name's Ryan McFarland, a good friend of mine for 20 years. And Ryan and I gave this talk around, this is an old slide, by the way, so if you look at Zeus, fake AVs, it's a long time ago. But this was 2008. And it's a good book to read, by the way, The Long Tail, Why the Future of Business is Selling Less of More. And if you apply this to data telemetry concepts, if you look at the left-hand side here, this is our noise in an environment, okay? The left-hand side is all the noise that we deal with. And this is going to be the commodity. This is going to be the normal stuff that happens day in and day out. Now, our whole job in cybersecurity, especially when we're looking at data telemetry, should be to try to minimize the noise and focus on what's really important. However, if you look at this tail, the stuff down on the bottom right-hand side are the things that we should probably be looking at from a deviation perspective. These are things that we should be looking at and saying, why is there a non-standard type of thing happening in our environment that we need to take a look at? And this is where you start to find a lot of the fun with developing detections, rules. A good example is, I'm not sure how lull bins still work in environments. I don't understand that. Like, lull bins have been around forever. They were actually released at DerbyCon, which is amazing. Did some great research. They did some great research on that, releasing it. But you look at Casey Smith, Sub-T, who was one of the most prominent when it came to research on living off the land, amongst other things. The guy's brilliant and humble as heck too. You look at where their focus is. Lull bins are well documented, at least most of them. There's new ones being discovered every day. There's ones that aren't published. But all the ones that are being used in the wild are all published. Why aren't we just spending 2 weeks looking at every lull bin? It's a simple rule. If they are a regular user and it matches this lull bin, bring up an alarm. Now, at first that's going to be noisy. But then you're like, well, hey, in these contexts of our business and how we use it in our environment, put those as exceptions. And now in 2 weeks, you have a pretty damn good list of lull bins that should never be executed in an environment, especially MSHDA, CBD, CSC, Mavenjacked, RegSVR32. Like, those are going to be ones that you're going to see all the time used by attackers. And I'd be really surprised if you had MSHD and RegSVR32 running on the context of regular user accounts in your environment. Those are simple things. Again, layers that I may not see in your environment. And by the way, it shouldn't be RegSVR32 with a /I/S/U/N. It should literally be when that process is created. I don't care about the command line parameters of it. I want to see that. Maybe you couple it with network communications as well, but you should never see that ever execute in your environment. It's that noise thing, the deviations of those patterns of behavior that make a big difference. And so telemetry is important, but the main part that we fall on is speed. How long does it take you to get a detection into your environment? And if it takes you more than a day to get it into production, you need to look at how you're doing your detection engineering. It needs to be quick. It needs to be fast. You should have all the data already available to you, and that process should already be hammered out to say, hey, we got this from a third-party threat intelligence source. Our threat hunters developed it. It's in our detection engineering process. It's applied consistently across the board. It has a knowledge base that goes out to our SOC analysts or MSSP. And now we're looking at that from a detection engineering perspective. It's fast. It should literally be, you should be cranking out detections every single day based on your environment, based off of threat hunting, based on the data you have, and building those landmines throughout your network as you start to go along. I tell you, if you build this concept around telemetry, visibility, always improving, fast detections, it's going to be pretty damn hard to get in your infrastructure. I don't care how crappy your vulnerability management program is. By the way, vulnerability management, the worst thing ever. I mean, having like interface with all businesses. You don't know who the owners are. Like then you start getting into like the middleware tiers and APIs and third parties. It's like, that's a bitch. That is the worst thing to go through. I had to do vulnerability management, and I will never do it again, all right? For anybody who's doing vulnerability management, you are saints. It sucks. So your detection strategy should have threat intelligence, threat hunting, and detection engineering all combined in one, and that's what I would focus my resources at. It wouldn't be red teamers. Unfortunately, I'm kind of biased in this. I would hire like 10 red teamers too, but if I could. But it would be literally focusing on these three concepts within your organization. You have somebody that's actively going through from a hypothesis-based threat hunting perspective, looking at your environment from that long tail. What are the deviations that we're seeing out there? Building baselines, building better exceptions in place, refining the detections that you currently have. Then you can couple that with a purple team down the road and you get more mature. But then you look at threat intelligence and say, well, what are the adversaries doing from a techniques perspective? Is there anything new out there? The WinRAR exploit comes out, cool, I already have the data types that I need to be able to detect that. That should be out that same day, roll out to production, good to go. By the way, we're not making system changes or anything like that, right? We're not shutting down servers or putting a new protection mechanism in. We already have the ability to do it right now. It's just we don't have a fast process to do it. So it's moving quick and applying agile concepts, agile workflow concepts, and unit testing across the board when it comes to detection engineering. I don't know why we're not doing this across all organizations. I understand it's complex and it's never gonna be perfect, but man, we could do a hell of a lot better with this. Here's my biggest pet peeve in this industry right now. And it's not, when I say the industry, it's not you all, you're all awesome. I'm just saying in general what we're talking about. Why aren't we building these landmines in deception? I have run into 2 companies in the past 10 years that do deception. Two. One of them was a small business, by the way. What the hell? They had a really good dude there. It was like one person that was an IT guy that was a total nerd on security. We ended up hiring him. The second one was a Fortune 1000, but it was one of their junior SOC analysts started building deception for fun on the side. 2, why do we not have deception in our environments? This stuff is so high of a priority. I mean, from a fidelity perspective, you're gonna see no bullshit, this is happening, no false positives, need to investigate right now, no noise, and it doesn't require a lot of resources. And there's so many different ones. I'll share these slides afterwards. I have a lot of examples that you can do for deception. But there's Fuzzy Knop wrote a script that's kind of like a run as. It's a PowerShell script that injects a fake domain admin and username and password into memory. Doesn't actually authenticate it, but it's in memory, right? So what I would recommend is creating a domain admin account that you make it like, Kronos account or Lexmark domain admin, legacy account, plan on phasing out, password hasn't been changed in 10 years, does not meet password complexity in the description, whatever you want to do to make it look believable. Give it a 700 character password, burn that thing, and then you run the script that runs on every endpoint in your environment and server that injects that account into memory with a fake password and wait for a failed login attempt. If I'm on a box and I do a comparison to your domain list and I see that domain admin sitting there and I see in the memory there's a domain admin with that password there, what am I going to do? 100% out of the time, I will go and I will authenticate with that username and password. And you're going to see that failed authentication attempt, and you're going to, all hell alarms break. This is like no BS. Something's happening in our environment. You should never see an authentication attempt there. Same thing for service principal names and Kerber roasting. When you're doing Kerber roasting, it's very rare to see an attacker just go after one account. So create an SPN. If you ever see that account being touched in any way, shape, or form, you know something's wrong. LLMR or Responder, another good example. Create a script that goes and looks for file shares with a fake username and password. If you ever see that failed login attempt, you know for sure that there's something in your environment. There's so many different ways, taking the applied concepts of red teaming and reversing it into deception. Again, no impact, users never see it. It's not doing CPU cycles, and these are high fidelity, low false positive things out there. Deception is the way. We should be spending so much time on this right now in our environments that, it's going to trip me up. I have been in 2 deception environments my entire time. And both times I've been caught. It sucks. Like, well, why isn't this working? I'll just move on, whatever. I'll go to the next thing. But all the alarms are broken up. Like, yeah, we've been monitoring you since like day 1. Here's everything you've done. We just didn't want to tell you and break your heart. Like, oh, thanks. Appreciate that. This sucks. So there's so many different things you can do. Now, logs are important. You don't need to, I'll publish this. You can see it. I'll publish a couple screenshots. Here are some of the high ones that I prefer. Command line auditing is so important. So when you look at command line auditing, it's a 4688. Sysmon with ETW, event log tracing for Windows, one of my favorite ones. Sysmon is so good. Yes, there are ways of getting around it. Are attackers doing that on a regular basis? No. I'd rather get the logs from ETW and be able to build a granular framework to send that back so I can see everything that's going on. That's a great way of getting started. Great way of doing rule set development and or nests, regular expressions, you name it. The image load type 7s are where I like to live at. That's where you get a lot of the process injection stuff, side loading and things like that, process hollowing. But again, we have ways of detecting all of this if we get the right logs. Some example use cases for parent-child process relationships, deception capabilities. Again, I'll throw all of this in here as we go along, but we have so many things that we can do to make it so much damn harder for the attackers that if we just spent some time actually focusing on what's important, it would actually work. And my biggest thing is, you look at red and blue, we all have the same objectives. It's funny, I had a slide in here about what red was like in the 90s, and it was like a wizard with a fireball, and you have a bunch of blue teamers like, oh my gosh, this is amazing, it's magic, right? That was actually some of the funnest times I had, because like literally I'd be on a week-long engagement or 2-week-long engagement. The first day I'd break into everything, and then I'd spend 2 weeks coding the Social-Engineer Toolkit because it's already done. So like I had test and prod code. When I wrote Magic Unicorn, it's like, hey, I got a Fortune 5 enterprise I can test my cool stuff on. Now one time, this is a true story, you can ask Hacking Elsie. So Elsie and I were in a country doing work for an actual country, the IT infrastructure for the country. And we're in this conference room, and I'm testing a WMI. It was WMI exec. I was coding WMI exec, one of the early versions of that, to do WMI shells before it was in Impacket. And so I get it to work, and I'm testing it out. But I start doing mass scanners that allow you to authenticate and get multiple shells, very similar all through WMI. This was like really new at the time. And all of a sudden, the entire IT infrastructure of the entire country shuts down. I'm talking airliners, government, email, everything's down, everything's red. They have no communications across the entire country. And I'm like, oh shit, something's not good. I'm like, and Elsie's like, what'd you do? I'm like, dude, I was just testing a script that should be fine. Like, I didn't do anything crazy. I was like, and literally all I hear is a bunch of screaming in a foreign language and TrustedSec. It's like, blah, 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 TrustedSec, blah, blah. And I see like Secret Service people, like suits and everything coming out. I'm like, oh my God, dude, I'm going to jail. It was a bad Cisco config push that they did. It wasn't us. Ended up getting out of it. But for the longest time, I thought I was going to jail. But that working together piece is so important for us to collaborate and understand offense. And yes, I'm going to show a thing of the Browns. Yes, I know they're not the greatest team ever, but if you're from Cleveland, you have to be a Browns fan. I don't really do football too much either, but it's okay. But understanding your offense is the way we look at defense. Not being told what the industry tells us to do. The industry tells us that we should go to AI. The industry tells us we should go to DLP. The industry tells us we should do this. Do what actually makes a difference in reducing the impact in your organization. And that's understanding how attackers work. You start building those defenses in, those layers, I will promise you, as I sit here today, you'll catch almost everybody, if not everything. Because those landmines are one, as Egypt had said, is that one chance for us as the blue team to respond and minimize the damage to the company. When the dwell time is what kills us, when they're for 5 hours, 10 hours, 2 weeks, 2 months, 5 months, that's what kills us. If we get them in an hour, 2 hours, halfway through the cycle, shit, I don't care if they get access to two or three servers. Cool. Didn't destroy our entire company. Those are the layers that make a big difference, that allow us to move fast. Get the telemetry data, have a process that puts detection engineering really quick, and please work on deception, because I guarantee you, next time we're in your environment, that will kick our ass.